We can't dance together. We can't talk at all.
You talking about the two of us?
No, I'm talking about society, about culture, about America.
Yeah, that's a problem, but one we're going to tackle head on coming up on Radically Rational. Hey, let me ask you a question. Do you love or hate either or thinking? Thank you, and welcome to Radically Rational, the podcast. At Radically Rational, we're bringing facts back into fashion. We're trying to make simple sanity sexy again, and if I violate my own policy, I will get roundly, verbally busted by an 8-year-old girl.
That's crazy.
I just sometime got to take my whooping. Okay, I don't know if you've noticed, but it seems that Americans, 330 million of us, are having a little bit of a tough time communicating with each other right now, and I'm kind of wondering why that is. So we have composed and compiled here the distinguished panel of journalists that people on shows like this do, and we've even got a couple of regular people too. So you might want to hang around for that. But these are wonderful people who make their living communicating on a daily basis, and we're going to try to find out exactly why we may be having such a tough time, maybe to a greater extent than we've ever had in American history. Nobody is more contentious than my co-host, Lori Pearson.
Hello. Yes.
Actually, that's not true at all.
We'll see.
We will see for sure. Also, one of the really good investigative television reporters in the country from the CBS affiliate in San Antonio, Nicole Kahn. How do I know she's good? Because I tried to hire her 3 times and I cannot afford her. Nicole, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Anytime I see this friend, it's a good day. Carrie Clack from the San Antonio Express News, really decorated columnist with, I think, a unique approach to opinion column journalism, and apparently some other people feel the same way because you just got a nice piece of hardware.
Yeah, now in June I won the Texas APME Star Opinion Writer of the Year Award, which I never even sniffed at.
Also known as the Medal of Freedom. And joining us from Houston, I have enjoyed getting to know this guy so much. I was introduced to him by my wife. Thank you, wife. I appreciate this. Alan Bernstein, who for so many years was a wonderful print journalist in Houston with the Houston Chronicle as a reporter, as a columnist, as an editor. He has done it all. He is now a corporate advisor. He has been on the inside of Houston politics for sure. Alan, we're grateful. How are you? Good to have you.
Getting away with it.
You know what? That's the position that we all want to be in for sure. Okay, so everybody here, to one degree or another, makes their living talking to people. It's been my experience that it's more difficult than it's ever been, to the extent that right now there's certain people, you can tell them good morning, and their response is, what do you mean by that? Am I wrong? Are you guys noticing the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. It can be difficult sometimes to communicate with people. But I think that's partially the media's fault. I mean, I think we do a really poor job of explaining how media works, and there's opinion, that's media, and there's local media, and trying to make a differentiation for people can be difficult.
That's an interesting point, and one we'll pick up on. Now, the advantage you could have is when you were universally lovable, like Carrie Clack.
Oh, no.
What's that like?
No.
What's that like?
If you saw some of my emails, and some, there's a reason why I pay less attention to my work email than I do to my my personal email, because most of my readers don't have my personal email address. So I got an email this week. It's in all caps. And it was one of these. Going to your question, it's a lot of it is because we don't agree on the same facts or what we think are the facts.
Oh boy!
So
that may be the rub.
This particular email was about the insurrection, and the email was telling me all these things which was going on, which I didn't see that particular day. And so back when I was younger, I would have responded to that email point by point.
Mm-hmm.
I ignored it this time.
Wow.
Because you can't, there are a lot of arguments that are worth getting into because you can have a conversation. But there are some that you know that all you're going to do is frustrate yourself.
It was Carole King 50 years ago exactly who said, you can't talk to a man when he don't want to understand. And it gets even worse. You can't talk to a man with a shotgun in his hand. Alan, you may be in kind of a unique position here because you're seeing this from a variety of different points on the compass. What's driving it, do you think?
Well, I think it starts with kind of a historical pattern that goes back to around 1980. And that is, that was a couple of things happened. The Ronald Reagan, who was elected in 1980, so the years after, eliminated the fairness doctrine, which said that if you broadcasters are going to use the public's airways, you have to be balanced to a certain degree. And then not long after, if I remember my MTV viewing habits correctly, back in the early 80s, cable happened. That's when cable came to Houston, and it came to a lot of other places too, which meant there are all kinds of extra channels for people to buy up and run. When the cable companies sold their cable rights to individual stations, now there were more, because I'm one of those people who remembers that a regular old TV got maybe 4 channels if you were lucky. Well, now there were more on cable, and that is when everybody started running to their own corners, and I mean the people in the public, because they were being offered a much wider spectrum of choices. And among the news channels that were out there on cable, eventually they figured out the Jim Hightower saying, he was our Texas agriculture commissioner for a while, that the only thing you'll find in the middle of the road is a dead armadillo, meaning that if the expansion of all those channels, all those choices that we could have as audience members wanted to monetize, which is a fancy word for make a lot of money, they would find their niche audience. And that wasn't necessarily the one in the middle. It was the ones that validated what people are thinking already. And so they turn on that channel to get their validation.
And that's kind of where we are right now and why we are that way. And Lori, just in personal communications, just interpersonal communication, there's just a friction there that I've never noticed before.
Well, and Alan made a good point. What happened to the middle of the road? And a lot of people like to say, well, if you don't pick a side, you're nowhere. But there's a time to be in the middle of the road in your information accumulation process, in your consideration of other people's opinion process. There's a place to be and go, I'm not quite sure how I feel about that yet, but I want to find out more about what you think, or I need to do some more reading, or whatever. The middle of the road is no longer an accepted place to be. You have to pick a side, or you have to opt out of media completely. Right. And that seems to be the problem. Mm-hmm. Right. And at some point you get pulled one way or the other because somebody accuses you of something or names you something, and we're all human and it hurts. Or you get a letter in all caps. Right.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that may be happening is that to a larger degree than ever before, we're making unfounded assumptions about each other, especially unfounded assumptions about strangers or people that we're meeting for the first time. We think that we can somehow just discern and divine what camp they're in. And of course, we've gotten ourselves in trouble because we've decided that there are 2 and only 2 camps, and you have to fall neatly into one of the 2. So people think they can assume your position on a given issue and maybe not. And I'll just give you one just quick personal example I saw. I had somebody just light me up like a pinball machine the other day on our website, radicallyrational.com, and also on social media. You've been spouting about defunding the police. I've never written or said one word about defunding the police, ever. And if anything, if you want to know, as long as we could get better results and better performance and raise the standards, I would be for raising the funding. But here's a guy who's worked up and hates me forever because of something that I never said and have never written. Likewise on the gun control issue. Do you know how many words I have written about gun control in my life? Exactly 0. Now, I do think, for example, that part of our problem is that we now have a gun-worshiping society. But that's got nothing to do
It's come out of the
with
division.
gun control. Exactly. You know, I say enough ridiculous things that you can bash me for that. You don't have to go making stuff up.
That's so true.
Yes, it is true. I told you she was contentious. I told you that right out of the gate.
I had to. Yeah.
Well, what do you think about this assumptions theory? I just think we think we know somebody when we don't.
I know I always get the label the liberal media. No one knows my politics, but
Right.
because I work in the media, they know my politics. And
Interesting.
you can't argue with people about it. You can't change their mind. So, I mean, I've learned within my family, you don't talk about who you vote for.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
That's how it used to be when I was, well, back in my day. You know, my parents didn't even tell each other who they voted for. It was kind of this thing that you just didn't do. And not because you were trying to avoid conflict, which now you kind of don't talk about it because you don't want to be attacked for it. Before it was just this respectful right for you to make your own decision and believe what you needed to believe and represent what you wanted to represent with respect from the other people in your household. Now it's, don't talk about this or that or you're going to get bludgeoned, right?
Have to be careful.
You got to be careful.
Let's maybe go back for a second to a well that Kerry kind of stuck his toe in a minute ago. It's really, really unfortunate right now that we're not drinking from the same well of facts. And just so you'll know, that's kind of the reason that Lori and I founded Radically Rational, is that we found ourselves living in a post-fact world. And it's difficult to communicate about anything if, number one, you can't agree on a basic set of facts. And Alan, number two, when you now have an effort to say there's no such thing as facts and alternative facts has become a credible term, and people they're not only ignoring facts, they're now disdaining them. And I'm perceiving a difference there. What do you think?
I think, again, for those people who plop down in front of the TV at the end of the day and trying to relax, that the last thing they want to do is be challenged by a set of facts that doesn't comport with their outlook on the world. And now that their outlook can be validated on 5 channels instead of 1 or none before, well, you know, you just kind of default to your comfort zone anyway. And why have, especially these, you know, news channels have gotten more willing to go to the edges of the spectrum instead of the middle and more shrieky, is because they're competing for that dollar from the viewership. That's all it is.
Yeah, I think that's the case. And Nicole, you were mentioning a minute ago that everybody tends to view everything now in media terms, whether it has anything to do with the media or not. It's like we have now come to look at the planet as nothing other than just a media landscape.
It is. And part of it, though, is the growth of social media, which can be good and bad. But think about it. We're all literally on the same page, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or other social media outlets. You can post whatever you want to think. It doesn't have to be vetted. There's no rules about that. And the algorithm is the people with the most likes or most retweets are the people then that have the loudest platform. And then often that becomes a media story because everybody's talking about it. So now you're either trying to validate it or disprove it.
Kerry, has that kind of been your experience right now? I mean, you mentioned all the correspondence that you receive from readers. Is there such a thing as a reasonable response anymore? Do you get feedback from somebody and go, even maybe somebody disagrees with you, and you go, okay, this person did this rationally, they made a good case, they took the time to respond, I'm okay with that. Do you still see that?
Yeah, I do actually, and those are the ones that I'll respond to. When I can't respond to everybody, but that I will respond to. They deserve a response. Because again, those are the ones that you can dialogue with. And it doesn't, you may not change each other's minds about something, but you have a better understanding.
Right.
And part of dialogue, part of talking to one another is what happens is you're building a relationship. So even if, I don't pick up the phone anymore and call anybody, but like when I used to get voice messages at the paper, reasonable calls, I would call back. And sometimes what would happen is, the ones that were really out there, every once in a while I would call them back, just because it would freak them out when I did call them back. And they want the same person. I mean, sometimes they literally they claim not to be the same person who had written the email with their name on it. But a lot of times I would call someone and we'd have a good conversation. We would not agree on anything, but we had built a relationship within our conversation, and we respected each other. And because I've been writing my opinion for 20-something years, so people know that I'm liberal. But I'm not as liberal on everything that people may think. People think I'm more liberal than I am. But I also believe in nuance. I believe in gray.
Right.
I believe in gray.
Carrie, you're so right, and I want everybody to chime in on this. There's just no calibration, okay? There is no continuum anymore of opinion. It's just categorical. You're in this shoebox or you're in that shoebox, and we have lost nuance, and as a result, we've lost quality of communication, and I would kind of maintain that on top of everything else, it's really kind of childish, because there were times when people usually outgrew that by the time they were in the fourth grade.
Right. Well, we've lost the ability to respect each other's opinions, and I know this. Well, they shouldn't be.
Here we go.
If they're wrong. They're wrong. They don't deserve respect. Whatever. But you had a perfect example of having dialogue with someone who thinks differently, God forbid, than you do. And I think where it all went wrong with MTV. Don't even get me started. At MTV, Alan, you were right. That's where the decline of Western civilization.
40 years ago, just last week, I think it started. MTV debut.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like to joke that I'm so old that I remember M in MTV. That's how old I am.
No, but I forgot my point.
No.
Paul.
Why you hated MTV?
No, but that's a whole other. That's another show. But we've forgotten how to have dialogue about a differing opinion. But also, we've decided now that the whole objective is to get somebody to agree with us. That bumper stickers have never changed anyone's mind. Neither have signs out in your yard. All that does is have somebody who agrees with you be behind you and go, yeah, or yeah, with the other finger. And, and I don't know, somehow along the line, we lost the ability to have those communications. And then we think that it's like, well, I'm not convincing you, then you're still wrong. And you know what I'm trying to say? Like, I don't, exactly what you're trying to say. I don't know why that went south either. Somewhere along the line, that division was truly made in our behavior and in our thought process.
I don't know why some people think that media ethics is an oxymoron. I don't think that. I will tell you this. I mean, like all of you, I've been engaged in one facet or another of media for a long time. I don't think, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, I don't think I've known 3 lying sumbitches in my career. Okay? I really don't. There's this perception out there that journalists have granted themselves a license to do anything. They're coming from a perspective. I really have not encountered a lot of unethical people in this business, and obviously I've been doing it for a long time. And I think that creates some defensiveness on the part of reporters and journalists. And Lori and I were kicking this around the other day. We'd love to do a show sometime, get all of you back, and talk about human ethics and what it means to be a good person. And you kick it around a lot of ways. All great societies, all great religions have some form of the golden rule. Mm-hmm. And there are times where I want to go golden rule, hit send, done. That's all. I get that. But one of the things I think I'm seeing right now, and Alan, I'd like to get you to respond to this, is that we've just unbridled ourselves from truth, or even looking for truth, or the search for truth. And we have destigmatized lying. There used to be a price to be paid for lying. And also, I think we've kind of expanded some rules here. I won't use this gentleman's name, but I worked with a sportscaster one time who would regularly report rumors. And it might have been something he'd heard one time from a completely non-credible or unestablished source. And we wouldn't get into arguments, but I just kind of look at him like, what you doing? And this is a direct response. Well, Paul, it's true that it's a rumor. Okay, this horse has left the barn.
Well, I think it does trace back to what works as in the warfare of winning elections. What I mean is that somewhere along the way, especially during the Clinton administration, when he had the whole Monica Lewinsky thing going, and it was the paid job of many people in the Capitol to figure out 3 new ways to attack that, not just for the benefit of the next person running against Clinton, but for the benefit of everybody running on the Republican ticket or the Democratic ticket. It was all strategized around that, is to say something that sounds like it's rooted in reality, and you go one more step outside to exaggerate it. You're doing it on purpose, because in that game of winner takes all, you hope that the opponent who's being accused will talk about it too. And there's that saying in the trade, it says, if you're splaining, you're losing. And so it paid off to say something that was a little bit more outrageous than you even knew, because now the other side, well, that's not true, and they're taking time away from what they wanted to tell the voters about themselves. And so once again, it's kind of like bad COVID germs multiplying upon themselves. When you edging out away into space from the truth, it just multiplies upon itself.
Yeah, and guys, because of social media, we're now essentially all our own media entities. So media ethics is now creeping more and more into private, personal, citizen ethics. And one of the things I think is just an amazing problem is the willingness to propagate something that is unestablished. And it's almost akin to what I said a minute ago. Well, it's true that I saw that meme. Well, is the meme true? No, but it's true that meme is there. And the fact that we feel free to disseminate that and let that grow and let that mushroom, I would maintain, is this too harsh? If you are involved in perpetuating a lie, you're not a broker, you're a liar.
I agree. And I've been guilty of sharing something on Facebook that turned out not to be true. And I mean, I'm really careful about this now, but you just, in the heat of the moment, whatever you just share it, you don't do your own fact checking. And I think one of the things that changed me, that got me out of that, was that the realization that reality doesn't always align with my politics or my likes. It doesn't always work out that way, that someone who I would vote against, there's always going to be bad stuff against them. Someone who I would vote for, there's always going to be good stuff for them. It doesn't work that way. And so that taught me to be more discerning. When we talk about, okay, I'm going to say 2 words and we're going to all think of one person. When we talk about fake news, that actually meant something in 2016 during the presidential election, because it was like on Facebook, you would see a story about one of the candidates, something, and you would think it was news, and it really wasn't. You might say it might have CBS, but it wasn't really CBS. It was, just somebody making this propaganda up, and it was often a lie. So there's that responsibility that we all have to be more discerning and to realize that, again, it just doesn't work out that way, that reality is going to always align with our politics and our lives, and it's not going to always make us happy.
Nicole, you work as an investigative reporter in television, which is really a specialized niche of journalism. People are going to be more likely, on a percentage basis, to lie to you, because nobody is happy to see you at their door. Let's get this straight, Nicole. This is not a good day. Nicole Kahn is outside and wants, oh man. How do you deal with that?
I'm really quick on my feet. I can sprint really well. No. So part of investigative journalism and part of journalism, I think you would agree, in general, is being able to do the work, which is the public records request, the documents, the data. And I've spent a lot of time educating myself because those are still things, yes, you can argue with. Just because you present data in one light doesn't mean that it's necessarily true. You have to be careful how you use it. But people are a heck of a lot less likely to argue with data and documents when you have them.
Does anybody do this anymore? And we can ask ourselves this as people, not just, talking about folks out in the world. Does anybody just look at somebody and say, you know what? I was wrong and you were right. I don't remember the last time I heard. Why would we be at all reticent to do that? I mean, why would that not be the ultimate gauge of personal credibility?
I'm trying to get back with the next girlfriend, so I'm doing a lot.
I think the 3 words you like to hear the most as a journalist are "you were right."
Yeah.
And circle that date on the calendar and put a big gold star on it for sure. It's really, Alan, don't you think? I'm keeping in mind all the various things that you've done in journalism and all the different people that you've dealt with in so many different facets. There's nothing more disarming than just saying, okay, I got you. You're making a fair point. Do you think people's willingness to do that has declined?
Oh, absolutely. For all the things we discussed, there's a very basic kind of animal thing about self-validation, whether you're comforting yourself by sitting in the Barca lounger looking at the TV station that reflects your point of view, to all other parts of life. And again, this has only been encouraged by the splintering and all the choices we have as to where we want to go to hear those messages. I'll tell you one thing though. Have you noticed that in local newspapers there are fewer corrections? And do we think that that's because the papers are getting more accurate?
No.
So if it's not because of that, there's one place, and Nicole talked about the media falling down on the job of explaining how it does its job, and I agree. Then you could start with the media being more forthcoming too. When's the last time you heard a network news broadcast say, now yesterday, when we said X, we need to clarify that today? Doesn't happen. Why not? Maybe that could lead the conversation going forward.
Alan, I agree, and I do think there is a reticence sometimes for media outlets to immediately admit and correct a mistake. But Carrie, it's all about how the sausage is made, and you know this. Part of that, there's a logistical reason for it. Budgets are tiny, staffs have shrunk. It makes it more difficult even if you're trying to do the right thing.
And even, I think Alan's right about the scarcity of corrections. Although I know the Express News still does it because I know that I was corrected recently for an editorial I wrote. But even back in the day, though the corrections were always kind of hidden, right. And but it feels good to admit that you were wrong. Actually,
yes,
it feels good to admit, whether it's personally or professionally, that I was wrong. I made a mistake. Not only does it feel good, it's healthy, because I think an important part, and kind of at the heart of what we're talking about, is that we all need to have doubt. We all need to have some doubt about everything that we know. We should never be so certain that any opinion that we have, any observation that we have is correct, that there may be something lingering that could change the way we think. And so, yeah, you want to be confident and you want to be assertive, but always have that doubt that leaves room for you to say that I was wrong and I made a mistake.
Oh, man, I so agree. A minute ago we were talking about people being unwilling to say I was wrong. They're also unwilling to say I don't know, because they think it makes them appear ignorant or stupid or foolish. Lori, I don't know about you. There's nobody's intellect that I respect more than somebody who will look me in the eye and say, I don't know. That's not a dumb response. That is a response of integrity.
Right, and the problem with having to have this ironclad opinion that is so, diametrically opposed to someone else's is that it's fragile. It's so fragile because you can't admit you were wrong. You can't admit that your source was wrong. You can't. Your Svengali was off, or what? You just can't. If they're wrong, then I'm wrong, and so that's why you have all this thing that happened over the last couple of years with people defending people who were creating stories that weren't necessarily accurate. Mm-hmm. It's like you were saying. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I promise you that it really is a sign of intelligence.
Yeah.
When you say, I don't know, it's something that I would like to call principled uncertainty. It starts with admitting that you're uncertain, but trying to do the right thing anyway. But now this has gotten, Alan, so through the looking glass that we now have people, and I'm completely staying away from any particular political issue or event or anything like that. There are people that will tell you that you really didn't just see what you just saw with your eyes and heard with your ears.
And I hate to be repetitive, but I hate to be repetitive. But this goes to advantage. Well, maybe I can, solidify my base as somebody in the political arena by giving them an alternative explanation that they can take with them out the door. And we've seen how effective it can be. Speaking of the courage to say, I don't know, one of my pet peeves in watching CNN, which is a valuable source, but you can't always, you have to be skeptical of what any source you're watching is all the time they spend talking to themselves live on camera. Well, Wolf, what do you think? I don't know, John, what do you think? Well, I don't know about that, Jana, what do you think? Now, they'll get fired if they say, well, I don't know. So they have to have an opinion. Or let's bring in 3 experts. So they'll do the triple split screen with the professor in Seattle and the medical specialist in Florida and somebody else. Well, tell us about what you're thinking. Note that there's no news reporting going on. It's just a conversation. I'm not learning anything new from that. I'm just learning opinions. I wish we could go back to when reporting was filling up most of their time. But anyway, you don't get invited back as a guest if you aren't sure. You have to be sure, and you have to take sides.
Interesting.
Well, and that's what the 24-hour news cycle has done, and the discovery that news can be a profit center, which is a relatively new development, particularly in American electronic journalism, for sure. Let's talk about conspiracy theories for a second, because they're driving our discourse more than anything. And I saw something on social media the other day, and on the surface, I completely agreed with it. And it essentially says, question everything. Guys, I'm in on that. Question everything. But here's what I'm seeing happen. It's great to question it. But when you get an ironclad answer to your question that you personally just find distasteful, you have to have the intellectual integrity to, okay, I asked the question, there's the answer. I didn't like the answer. It didn't fit my conspiracy theory. But when confronted with overwhelming fact, we see this all the time right now. People just there's no pun involved here, but they just won't give up their guns on that.
It's like Paul, you're sitting next to Lloyd, but you're not really sitting next to Lloyd. I mean, y'all want us to think you're sitting next to each other, but you're not really sitting next to each other. I want to know why. How are you making me do this? I mean, it's that kind of stuff where it's the most obvious thing. And I agree with you, question everything, but to a point.
Well, and then we've gotten, not we is the royal we've gotten ourselves dug in so deeply that a simple investigation into someone's version of the facts that don't happen to match with my hole I dug for myself, that's not going to pull me out. Okay, I hear that you're saying that I'm not sitting next to Paul, but I'm going to have to do my own research and decide whether or not I'm sitting next to Paul. I mean, your opinion's nice and all that, but I don't know either, right? It's just there's just not I'm saying we're holding on to our opinion so strongly that someone's opposing opinion is going to have to more than make up for the doubt we have in ourselves to hang on to our opinions tightly.
Particularly given the fact that you're not really listening in the first place. Remember when a conspiracy theory, there used to be a little bit of kind of a tinfoil hat stigma on that. Okay, I have a nice day. Now there are people who really think that the wilder the conspiracy theory, and the more labyrinthine it is, and the more complex it is, and the more completely unbelievable it is, that somehow that means that they're flexing their intellectual muscles. See, I thought of stuff that never would have occurred to you.
I saw a cartoon somewhere where a guy is on the internet and he's yelling to his wife, "Honey, I found out some research that the scientists and doctors didn't find." I mean, that's basically what, and it's like, and you hear the same thing with, we've been hearing this a lot in sports, in NFL with COVID. Do your research. I need to do more research. No, that's not what it's about. It's that you don't agree what is the established facts and what we know about the research. And so you're looking for something that's going to validate the conspiracy or the way you think about this particular topic. It's not about research. It's about finding something that's going to bolster you and not challenge what you think you know or don't know.
Well, oh no.
Please.
No, it's a simple little comment. Conspiracy theorists who assume that the other person is the one with the conspiracy.
That's an excellent point.
I'm not the one with the
That's right.
You guys are the one that are trying to. I know what you're trying to do, Carrie. Cole. And your research and your documents.
And your numbers.
Your silly data. How dare you go into those courthouses with that?
Hey, if I wanted to know anything about math.
I mean, we're journalists. We're infamously terrible at math.
Not funny.
Guys, let me ask you this, and I'd like everybody to weigh in on it. We were obviously heading this direction societally anyway, but how has the pandemic accelerated all this? And again, I'm staying away from anything overtly political on this, but it's changed the environment simply in the sense that we're all, without exception, stressed out our minds right now. So that exacerbates pretty much everything. Don't mean it as an excuse, just maybe an explanation.
Well, and plus we're lonely.
What? Well, darn right.
Lonely, no communication. The people we're stuck in the house with for the last 18 months, they're driving us bananas. We don't want to communicate with them. We want to shut down and break away. And, we said earlier, I think, that now there's an even bigger need for communication, real communication. And by communication, I don't mean getting you to agree with me, and more than ever. Again, my favorite analogy is like this country is a marriage counselor's dream come true. Like this is a lock-in. I'm going to put a porch on my back and I'm going to get that pool I always wanted. I mean, it's like, can we just start to just say, I hear what you're saying. Tell me why you feel that way. God forbid. No, we don't want to know that because you're crazy. That's where we are. This is the worst possible marriage destined for.
Yeah, no, really.
Truly.
It's like, exactly. If you really love me, argue with me, damn it.
Well, or, if you really love me, go to counseling with me and help you understand where we went wrong. I mean, that's what we need. We're just really in a mess communication-wise. I think, go ahead.
I would say, Paul said to be endlessly questioning, but I think we need to be more endlessly curious, not necessarily questioning.
Love that.
Much better word.
Yes.
And sometimes people have very strong views, and it doesn't help to argue with them, but to say something about, okay, tell me about that. How did you get there? Show me your work. And then you start realizing where they're coming from a little more.
And even if it's not scientifically based or factually based. I come from this position because, and then you get to the bottom of it. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's an experience that happened that they don't want to happen again. So they've decided to go down that route. But there's always a reason. People aren't just
And if you're being, and to
making
what
stuff
Nicole
up.
said, and that's a great point.
Yeah,
If you're curious, about everything and others, you're going to listen. You're not going to just be talking. If you're truly curious about someone else's observations, life experiences, you're going to listen, and you're not going to talk as much. And thus comes the communication and the dialogue.
We don't listen. We just shut up long enough to formulate our next response to something that we're not really listening to anyway.
right.
Why?
On the bright side, on the bright side of media communications and people taking the most popular and seemingly reliable message to heart and not rejecting it, is the fact that due to newspapers and TV and every other form of coverage, there's actually been national adjustments in the recommended behaviors for dealing with the pandemic. You all can help me with examples, but yeah, at the beginning it was thought that you can't be outdoors with people, and
Right.
then that changed to you're pretty safe outdoors. This was before the vaccine. And I'm pretty confident in saying that the majority of people in the United States have monitored those changes and titrated their behavior accordingly. Why have they been willing to accept those messages? Because there's been a whole variety of sources, from the CDC and Anthony Fauci to maybe their local pediatrician. So once you have enough of a movement and enough grounding in good information, thank goodness it can still happen where you have a public health consensus.
There are mixed messages for sure. But first of all, we have to acknowledge that it is the nature of science that science changes. Mm-hmm. You only know what you know when you know it. And you don't have to know everything else at that moment to know what you know, but you realize that knowledge will grow. And as the facts change, and as we learn more about it, as the information changes, as things mutate, I'll just leave it, just whatever it is you think it is, mutate, you have to acknowledge that if advice is changing and messages is changing, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're cynically being lied to. It means that the information is changing, unless you want to believe that you're being cynically lied to so that you can demonize somebody.
I think we also have to be careful, though, and I can understand why people are skeptical, because the government has lied to people before.
No doubt.
And they make it very difficult, especially when you're trying to get public records. I'm just saying that they're not very transparent with it. So I can understand why people are skeptical.
Right.
Why have all of us granted ourselves the right to give ourselves a PhD on every subject? That is something new, in my estimation. Despite my myriad faults, and Lori can document every single one of them.
No.
I have never been the least bit hesitant to defer to somebody who knows more about a subject than I do. That doesn't make me uncomfortable. It doesn't make me feel inadequate. I'm going to listen to somebody who knows something about a subject to a greater extent than I do. I don't know that I would consider myself an expert on two subjects on earth, and neither one of them matter.
Unless you think that person has an agenda, then you're not going to listen to them.
You're right, but
even if they are smarter.
That perception is based on what?
Dr. So-and-so, who could totally disagree with how you feel on something in any subject, who is a legit doctor, could disagree with you and tell you something that you don't agree with, and you feel your background and history and other things you've heard from doctors that you do agree with. I mean, then what? Then what do you do if someone who's actually has a higher level of education in that field than the decision you're trying to make? What do you do? Do you get a second opinion? What's the difference between that and a second opinion?
That's an interesting question. And I think pursuing a second opinion is fine. But if you get a second opinion that runs counter to the first opinion you got, and subsequent to that, you get 99 more opinions that agree with the original opinion, that's not being balanced. That's not seeking a second opinion. That's seeking validation.
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe they're all wrong.
Well, let's argue about that too.
Well, that's another
All
thing.
right.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of kind of along the same line, but it's like the whole thing that happened with Simone Biles in the Olympics and
Right.
the backlash, which I'm thinking now that if someone like me who's following Twitter all the time, maybe the backlash was more there than any place else, because everywhere else she was pretty supportive. But it was just all these guys who criticizing her for not sucking it up, and when I think what she does, what gymnasts do, is the most courageous athletic. I mean, they're in the air and spinning and twisting, and what did she say? She had the twisties because she just lost. And so all the folks, the guys, it was men criticized her exclusively, couldn't do a somersault. And to imagine themselves doing that and with all this other stuff in their minds. But hey, I could do that. It's a different kind of arrogance and deluding yourself in some kind of expertise you have, but it's rooted in an arrogance of some kind.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what else has kind of disappeared from our lexicon? The term benefit of the doubt. Nobody gives anybody the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to immediately make the worst assumption about you I can possibly invent.
True.
I use this again. People tend to know my politics, and when you're a black columnist, you get this stuff all the time about all you do is write about race, da da da. But in years past, whenever there was an incident where someone, a William Bennett or a Jesse Helms or somebody, or someone on the Golf Channel was accused of making a racist comment, my thing was always to look at, okay, what exactly did they say, and was it really racist? And so more often than not, I would write columns defending them because I didn't think on its face it was racist, or it was not intended in the way that it was meant. Because again, to me, nuance is important. And when you call someone a name, you call someone a racist or a misogynist, it should really mean something. I mean, you should really have your facts. And if someone didn't say it, then give them the benefit of the doubt and show them the same grace that I know I say. We all say things that we don't mean or that's taken in a different way. So show the same grace that you would want shown to you.
Another word that's disappeared from our vocabulary, and Nicole, maybe you're uniquely qualified to comment on this, is that, as Carrie indicated, there is no nuance anymore. And the other thing that is not required, evidence not required. And again, I am not referring to any particular event, any particular subject, any particular issue, but even in these really, really heated debates that you see in social media, nobody feels any obligation to back up anything they're saying. And this is not limited to, one group of people. I'm not picking on somebody and giving somebody else a pass. But it's like you don't even need evidence anymore. Well, why do you think that's true? Well, because it's true. Well, can you tell me? No, man, everybody knows that. And everybody knows that has become some kind of intellectual foundation here. And I don't think I was seeing that before.
Well, in all fairness, Paul, not everybody's a journalist and has to source and show their work to say necessarily. So, and I think a lot of times when you can no longer start attacking the fact, you start attacking the person, to Carrie's point. And I see it so much, especially with women on television in journalism. It's horrifying.
I think people are getting different sources of gratification and satisfaction right here. I think we're now in a position where we think our lives are more enjoyable. More enjoyable, Alan, if we can find somebody to hate. The more I could hate somebody or something, the more fun I'm getting out of life. I've got maybe a little logical problem with that.
I don't think that we are built that way to try to find somebody to hate. I think what you're talking about, Paul, may be that you're going to find somebody who's a stand-in for the belief system that you abhor or don't understand.
Nice.
Okay, I now, and I will take full responsibility of this. I am fully guilty now for the last roughly half hour right now of whining about all these problems and outlining all these problems, and I have not offered a single solution. So we're either going to be stuck in this quagmire forever, Lori, or we're going to have to do something about it. What's the most productive thing that we can all do on the individual micro level?
To have a conversation like we're having, and use those terms we all learned in counseling. Tell me why you feel that way. Explain to me where you're coming from on that. Well, actually, Nicole, you'd be the best one. How do you get people to tell you things that they don't want to tell you?
It's not easy, but
Yeah.
you know, you have to establish trust. So
Right.
you know, having a very difficult conversation with somebody the first time you see them is not always the best thing. It's often the conversation I have to have with them, though.
Right,
So you know, I always say, I really don't want to hear your side of this, because while something may look like one thing, it could very potentially not be that.
Right.
And unless they're willing to explain, you would have no idea.
That's true. Establish trust. Have discussions.
I think Carrie and Alan, you both have excellent and unique historical perspectives on this, and I'm not calling you old. Okay. I'm
Not that there's
saying
anything
old.
wrong with that.
No, exactly. But can this marriage be saved? And I'm talking about our country right now. I
Right.
mean, can we put Humpty Dumpty back together again? There are days when I'm fatigued and depressed, and I get pretty pessimistic about that. Are there better days ahead?
You know, I was on a forum yesterday. I was saying the exact same thing. And I'm a naturally optimistic person, but there are some days that I have so much fear where we're at as a nation, as our democracy is at. But we have no. If you're given a day to breathe, then you're given a day to fight. You're given a day to do what you can, whatever it can, whatever, even if it's just dialoguing with someone I mean, and then you look at the children in your lives. I mean, you know, seriously, this past year was we talk about this all the time about, you know, do it for the children. I believe the children are the future. For some reason, this was the first. I'll be 61 in 2 weeks, but last year was the first time that I started looking at the children in my family, and through them looking at the future and feeling this sense that, okay, I have to do what I can, whatever it is, so that, first of all, they can get to be my age, and secondly, that when they get to be my age, they don't have the same problems that we're going through now. So I think as long as you have breath in your body, you have to do something that you can to fight and to make things better, whatever. The smallest things. You know, we can't change the world one huge leap at a time, but we have a small parcel of earth that we're responsible to cultivate. And that's, you know, each of us cultivating our parcels of earth is how we make things better.
Alan, what do you think about that point? Because Carrie's talking about the way we view our children. And if you look at societal decline historically, that's been a really, really glaring indicator. The definition of sanity is caring about your children. And the definition of societal insanity is losing that concern for children. I think the one thing we all thought we could rally around and agree on is that we would want the best for our children. Alan, there are any number of ways right now where we're just sending our children out into the wilderness and saying lots of luck.
Well, adopting what Carrie said, you know, we're all trying to do that if we have children or if there are children in our family, because whether we even sit down to think about it or not, you know, we're trying to inculcate them with our values. Like I said, sometimes not on purpose,
Right.
but we are doing it. And so, and that is one of the basic jobs I think we all have been assigned. Um, but going forward with the marriage being saved, Paul, um, I, I think we'll be able to go forward to a better uh, situation with the marriage, but forget about trying to go back to last year, 5 years ago, or the honeymoon. And because we're not. Let me extrapolate that over to the news media. You want to talk about halcyon days, the golden days of newspapers? There weren't any.
Fair
Yeah, you
point.
had the Watergate investigation by the Washington Post, the Pentagon Papers at the New York Times, but those papers were grinding an axe and making unfound judgments about people then. And actually, over time, things have gotten fairer in the mainstream media. So there's no golden days we can go back to. We're going to have to make it better for next time rather than better like it was before, if that makes any sense.
It makes a tremendous amount of sense. And I'd like to go around the horn here and ask everybody this question. You guys have been so generous with your time, and the conversation's been just absolutely wonderful. But we'd like to think sometimes that we've never been in this deep a hole, that things have never been this polarized in America. And the truth of the matter is, there are more ways for that polarization to manifest itself and get expressed, but there have been times when we have been every bit this polarized in American history. We're not going to, as Alan indicated, we're not going to waltz together all the time. We are going to have to find a way to peacefully and hopefully productively coexist. But as you assess the landscape, if you could make one prescription here that you think might at least incrementally improve the situation, Lori, what would that be?
Which landscape?
The fact that we do have a communication vacuum, and that there is more polarization, and there is more venom, and there is less trust, and as a result, there is more danger of societal decay.
Going back to the children part, my daughter, when she was in elementary school, they went through a specific, I guess, a teaching style or program, and it was called SEL, Social Emotional Learning, and that was the principle via which every month they had a new thing, no bullying, whatever. It was elementary school, but they had something called, I can't remember it. I'll remember it. But when somebody bullied somebody, for example, my daughter, sorry, babe, my daughter bullied somebody when she was in 5th grade, and it was ugly. Okay. So she and the group of girls that did this went and they had to make a formal apology to this little boy, and then they had to come after school and work on a quilt for this little boy. And they did every Tuesday after school. And then they had this sort of bridge ceremony thing where they presented it to him with heartfelt apologies. Truly, like, we have experienced something about your culture that we weren't aware of. I mean, even as little kids, I'm saying I think we can all relearn, and we have to be willing. But I do think on your children point, and Alan, you talked about it as well. We all referenced children, and I think we have to give kids an opportunity to think differently, and that is the hardest part, because you talk about fighting. Today you have another day to breathe. You have another day to fight. For many people, that means fighting for my kids' rights to be like I am, and it's like, no, that's not quite how that works. But I think that we have to educate our children in ways that help them have more critical thinking, an ability to understand someone else's point. And I know that, I mean, that's so like hypothetical, but I mean, you raise kids exactly, and we're just repeating the situation. We're building on it if we don't do that. We're just concentrating that poison as we get further and down our generations, unless we stop it. That's my thing. It's like, because I don't know if we can help each other now. It's kind of
I
that
can't
train's
help
off the tracks, you know.
you. Nicole,
But my
what do you think?
kid, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when I get somebody who's angry and irritated and doesn't like some of my reporting, whether, you know, they feel it's factual or not, I always ask them, you're not going to like the story, but how do you want to resolve this? And so sometimes it's, you know, I want a retraction, or I want this added, and I can't always give them what they want, but then we have a point of starting, and sometimes I can give them something.
Right. You've respected their opinion.
People talk a lot about speaking truth to power. You hear a lot of activists on all sides talk about, speaking truth to power and you know, bringing it to the man, which is easy because you have no relationship with that particular. I think the way you really can create change is by being a good, offering valuable critiques of those who think the way you do. You usually agree with each other on most topics, but there's something that you disagree with. There may be a particular issue you may disagree with. I think it takes more courage to speak truth to people who are like-minded, because those are the people you have relationships with. So yeah, I bring it to the man. I speak truth to the man, but you know, speak truth to your brother and your sister and to your best friends. And I think that's the only way, because when we're talking about these silos that we have, where people are just listening to those who agree with them, you're going to inevitably have one person in those silos who disagrees and says, wait, this isn't right. That's the one person who has to speak truth to their family and friends. And I think that's how we begin to, just like when it comes to racism, there are things that I can say that no one's going to listen to, Paul, but if you say it, because you're a white man, same thing with women.
It depends on whose mouth it's coming out.
It does. Exactly. And so when it comes to sexism, you know, it's things that Nicole and Lori can complain about, but people aren't going to listen. But if we're men, because we're the group that's, you know, perpetrating it, so it has to be someone from inside those silos who you know, bangs on the wall or opens the door or something to get some fresh air in.
Yeah, Simone Biles was a quitter. She just quit on it. Yeah, I'm a male, and I know about these things. Alan, Carrie touched on maybe journalism being redefined to some extent, and having worked a lot in the corporate journalism environment, and as we all know, there are only about 5 players left in America right now. So there tends to be a lot of homogeneity about that. And I've heard a lot of people kind of want to redefine journalism, and I'm not sure it's a bad thing, but one of the bromides that was going around corporate media recently is that journalism is nothing else other than holding the powerful accountable, that everything else is a press release. And I'm hearing that and I'm going, okay, I get where you're coming from, but I also think that, you know, some of the basic W's, the who, what, and when, and where are still important. And if we get, I'm not saying we shouldn't expand this to why and how and to what effect and how does it impact people. But I do think that it's almost become a journalism medal of honor, and it's admission into the Knights of the Round Table. That the more I focus exclusively on holding the powerful accountable, the more validated I am professionally. What do you think?
Ooh, that is falling down off a very steep cliff, because now we're talking about the psychology of the people doing that work. And Lori, most of us we're in the business because we were the ones who were bullied, not doing bullying. And I think we're trying to even up the score sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's going to cost you a big old shrink bill there. But I think you're right. But Alan, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
I'd rather address
right.
the other part of your question, which is about changing the media and how it works, hopefully for the better for everyone. There's some worthy experiments going on. They don't always succeed with nonprofit journalism like the Texas Tribune, like ProPublica, where a lot of that investigative work is being done, as well as decent cover of the legislature, say, and they're the only bottom line they're worrying about is whether or not they get enough donations, and they're transparent about who the donations are coming from. That could be the model that leads traditional mainstream media out of the trough. I personally don't think that demanding that Facebook, for example, be censored as a private company, be controlled is a way out, because the water just runs off in a different direction, if you know what I mean. So maybe, like I said, we should look to, if the profit model hasn't been working lately, and it hasn't for mainstream media, maybe we ought to think about getting rid of it completely.
Wow. But we still have taboos, don't we? And again, you guys have been so generous with your time. I know we need to wrap this up, but we still have taboos. And I'll just throw out a couple of generic examples. You better not talk about critical race theory, whether you have the slightest idea what it means or not. And that's not a value judgment on my part. I was just saying that people don't feel an obligation to define it before they get worked up about it. Or the recent book, Forget the Alamo. Oh, baby, just pull the pin on that grenade and roll it to the middle of the courtyard. We still have taboo stuff we just dare not talk about.
Right.
And those two are connected. I mean, those two are connected. In critical race theory, my critical race theory is the biggest critics of critical race theory never use those three words in the same day, much less strung them together before 2021. Right. I, as an African American who spends a lot of time in barbershops and black churches, know a few black people, have never had a discussion about critical race theory. Right. And we know what it is. It's an excuse to not talk about all the stuff we said we were going to start talking about last year after George Floyd was killed, and which actually was a window did open where a lot of people did want to learn stories that they hadn't heard before. But now we go back to and the same thing with Forget the Alamo. I mean, it's all connected because it's about slavery, it's about race, and we don't want to talk about those things. Well, I mean, that's literally what the legislatures are saying. We don't want anyone to talk about anything that's going to make us feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, Alan, how dare you tell me that you once saw Roger Staubach have 3 beers? You just don't want to hear it about your heroes, right? You don't want to hear anything that tarnishes your image, your impression of your heroes. If you've decided they're squeaky clean, it's not a matter of trying to besmirch them or trying to find dirt on them, but maybe just acknowledge their humanity a little more.
And careful about how you deal with it because of unanticipated consequences. Now that book, which I will call FTA, because you didn't want me to talk about that book about that thing in downtown San Antonio. But careful what you wish for, because, well, my wife has written some edgy books about Texas history, not about the Alamo, and I'm just hoping to rewind the clock to when the last one came out about 5 years ago, so that the lieutenant governor will say something bad about it. Because he helped that book.
Yeah, it's good for business.
Get on the bestseller list, the top 10 bestseller list from the New York Times.
Nice.
So just careful how you put these things in little boxes, because it might have the opposite result that you intended.
Guys, I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you. We want to do it again.
Thank you.
And let me just throw this out for the next time we all get together. Something's going on here I don't think we've seen before. We've always, historically, as a country, we've had a hard time selling the virtues of democracy to the rest of the world. This is the first time we've had to sell democracy to our own people. And I think that is a sea change. So we'll save that for next time. But Alan Bernstein, thank you so much. Carrie Clack, man, anytime I get a chance to talk to you, it's just a wonderful day. Nicole, if you'd stop all the muckraking, you might be a pretty good person too.
I'll consider it.
And Lori and I are getting better and better about tolerating each other. Is that right?
Yeah.
We're Radically Rational. We invite you to visit our website at radicallyrational.com. Got some fun stuff going on there, daily videos, our podcast, got a news blog, got a sports blog, and we're all about having some fun. It's about bringing facts back into fashion, trying to make simple sanity sexy again. But just remember this, we're not crazy, but some of you are highly shady. Until next time.